All right, I'm really excited to talk about this painting. This is a fairly recognizable painting, I would say. It's in the Art Institute of Chicago. This is Edward Hopper's Nighthawks. So the main technical question that it's being addressed here is what does artificial light look like at nighttime? So we have several sources of artificial light in this painting, and I love that we can't see any of them. We can just see the light itself, but we don't see where it's coming from. So the main source of light, obviously, is going to be from within the diner. And there's fluorescent lighting, and this is coming from Hopper himself, who kept a kind of a journal entry about this painting. He says that there's an artificial fluorescent light source that comes from the upper right-hand corner of the ceiling that I've just outlined here. So like I said, we can't actually see the light, but we know that this is the brightest area of the painting. This white wall along here is the brightest area of the painting, especially the ceiling. So we have the light emanating down like this. Now, this light is spilling out of the cafe, out of the diner, onto this city street corner. And what it does is it creates some interesting shadows here. So I'm going to just sort of outline some of the major shadows. There's a shadow here. We can see another shadow here that's created by this guy who's sitting down. Here's another shadow. And of course we have the outline of the building itself. And there's a shadow that runs like here and here. So we can see how Hopper has painted how this light essentially kind of flows out of this building and illuminates some of the features on the sidewalk. But the more interesting aspect, or the more interesting study of light, is if you draw your attention to right here, you can see that there's a shadow line that's created on the side of this building right here. And it moves down like that, just like so. And this is coming presumably from light that's flowing out of this kind of back window of the diner. So the light comes out of the diner. I can just never draw arrows on this. There we go. So the light is flowing out of this back window of the diner, and it's illuminating the sides of these buildings. Whoop, can you hear the train? So what's interesting, though, more so than that, is we have a second shadow line that comes right here. And the only reasonable conclusion, I think, is that there has to be another additional light source. And it seems like that light source is coming maybe further down this way. And Hopper said that there was a street light that isn't visible in the painting, but there's a street light that's providing this additional illumination over on this head, on this side of the painting. In terms of color, so we've talked a lot about light and shadow. Color-wise, the men in suits inside the diner are dressed pretty drably, right? Kind of reflecting the types of colors that are used outside. So we have this kind of weird dark green color and the kind of, I don't know, reddish brick color here. It's not very exciting. And of course this makes sense because we know that at nighttime our eyes aren't adapted to seeing very well at night. The cones don't have very good resolution, so we can't appreciate colors in their full intensity at nighttime. So Hopper has reflected that fact by using these kind of drabber colors outside to convey this sense of darkness, which is interesting because we have this question of how do we paint darkness, how do we paint the absence of light? And we can do that by showing where the light is, as is the case of that's why shadow is so important, or brightness, like we see here, right? Brightness. And we can also talk about how color, right, is contingent on light. That was the big idea that was one of the driving ideas behind Impressionism. So the only people who are not dressed in these kind of boring, darker colors would be the server inside, who's dressed in all white, and in that sense kind of reflects the brightness of the diner. So those two kind of form a unified entity, right? The server and the diner are both this bright white. And then the focal point of the image is the woman. I shouldn't say the focal point, but where the eye is immediately drawn is the woman, who's dressed in bright red. She has red hair, she has red lipstick. She really stands out from the rest of the color scheme in this painting, and the eye's immediately drawn to where she's sitting. Geometrically, I mean, we could go on forever about some of the technical aspects of this painting, but geometrically this is interesting because perspective-wise, we're looking at this at kind of a weird angle, as if we were a passerby on the street who had just crossed the road. And this perspective is important because it allows us to see the man and the woman sitting together face on instead of from the side, like would be kind of the traditional perspective in a painting like this. In the building itself, kind of juts out, kind of like a triangle, like the point of a triangle, and that's reflected by the counter, which has a similar kind of shape, like this. Okay? So let's move on and talk a little bit more about what Hopper was trying to convey here. I would say the big theme here is alienation. Keep in mind when this is painted, which I don't think I actually said, this was painted in 1942. So we're talking about World War II here, this sense of kind of isolation, right? There's a lot of people who aren't home, they're off in Europe fighting in the war. It's kind of a time of uncertainty in the United States. And I think Hopper wanted to paint kind of what alienation looks like. First of all, you as the viewer, your perspective is you're on the outside of this diner, right? You're separated from the individuals on the inside. And there's not even like a doorway anywhere here. We have no idea how to get inside. We're completely isolated from these people who are inside this diner. And these people, in some ways, seem to be isolated from each other. We have the man and the woman, of course, who are, I guess they're sitting together, but they seem to be kind of disconnected. We don't know if they walked in together. Maybe they just met each other inside this diner. And then, of course, the clearest example of isolation or alienation or whatever we want to call it would be this man who's off sitting by himself. But aside from this kind of profound feeling of loneliness, I think we get the attention to detail is very stimulating in this particular painting. We get the idea of what American culture was like at this time period based on the outfits, the setting of the diner, and also the attention to detail that we see in the diner. We have the cherry wood counters and the stools that are fun to spin around on, the salt shakers, the napkin holders, even down to the big silver coffee urns where we can actually see in the straws how much coffee is remaining in each of the urns.